My wife of 39 years stood up in a courtroom in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and asked the judge for our paid-off house worth $410,000, half of my retirement account, and $3,200 a month in support for the rest of her life. Then she looked across the aisle at me, lowered her voice so only I could hear it, and said, "You are going to die alone in a rented room, Carl." My sister Pauline was sitting in the row behind me, 74 years old, gripping my shoulder with both hands, whispering, "Fight her, Carl. For the love of God, fight her." And when the judge asked how I wished to respond, I stood up, buttoned my jacket over the envelope in my inside pocket, and said, "Your Honor, give her everything she is asking for." The judge took off her glasses. "Mr. Novak, I want to be sure you understand what you are agreeing to." I said I understood completely. She asked once more, slower, "The way you talk to a man standing too close to the edge of something." I said, "Give my wife exactly what she has asked for, and I would appreciate it if we could have her sign the financial statements under oath today, while we are all here." Everyone in that courtroom looked at me with pity. My own lawyer looked at me like I had lost my mind, and Lorraine, my wife, smiled the smile of a woman who has just won everything, gathered her purse, and walked out of that building into the July sunshine. What she did not know was that the envelope in my pocket held 3 sheets of paper. And on one of those sheets was a single sentence that, 5 weeks later, would put that same woman down on her knees on the sidewalk outside that same courthouse, in front of strangers, at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. I know how that sounds. Stay with me, because I am going to tell you exactly which sidewalk and exactly which sentence. I am glad you are here, friend. Before we go on, do me one small favor. Tap subscribe and put the name of your city in the comments, because I read them at night with my coffee, and I like knowing how far an old man's story can travel. Now let me back up and tell it properly. My name is Carl Novak. I am 66 years old, and for 40 years I investigated insurance fraud for a company you have probably mailed a check to at some point in your life. Staged car accidents, kitchen fires that started in 3 corners at once, widows on claim forms whose husbands turned up alive in Florida. 40 years of that work teaches you 2 things. Paper is patient, and liars are not. It also gave me a saying I must have repeated to 100 young adjusters over the years. 3 documents beat a good story, every time. A man can talk for an hour and make you believe anything, but you put 3 pieces of certified paper side by side on a table, and the truth just sits there, not caring who cries about it. I want you to remember that saying. It is the whole spine of what happened to my family. Lorraine and I married in June of 1985 at a little Lutheran church on the south side of town. She was 26, or so I understood, working the counter at a title office. I was 27, 3 years into the insurance job, and I thought she was the most self-possessed woman I had ever met. Nothing rattled her. I mistook that for strength for almost 4 decades. It was practice. We raised 3 children in a brick house on Kirkwood Street. Carrie came in '86, our serious one, who grew up to be a paralegal and reads everything twice, including birthday cards and cereal boxes. Doug came in '89, our worker, an electrician with hands like his grandfather and a quiet way of watching his mother that I never understood until this year. And Beth came in '92, our soft one, a 2nd grade teacher who has kept every greeting card anyone ever gave her in shoeboxes labeled by year. I am telling you these small things about my kids on purpose. Every one of them matters later. There were only 2 locked things in our whole marriage. The first was a cedar chest at the foot of our bed that Lorraine called her mother's linens, which I never opened in 39 years, because a man does not pick the locks in his own house. The second, I know now, was my wife. The trouble did not start with the divorce. The divorce was the middle. It started 5 months earlier, in February, with a message from a stranger. I was at the kitchen table with my 2nd cup of coffee when my phone showed a message request from a name I did not know. Wendy Kessler. No mutual friends. 40 years of fraud work makes you allergic to messages from strangers, so my thumb was already moving to delete it when I read the first line. "Mr. Novak, I am sorry to contact you this way. I believe the woman you are married to is my mother, and I believe she may still be married to my father." I sat there a long time. The coffee went cold in my hand and I did not notice until I drank from it. My first thought was scam. I had spent a career watching people invent relatives. So I wrote back one line, the same line I used for 40 years. Anything you can put on paper. 10 minutes later, a photograph arrived. A wedding picture. The square kind with the white border, dated in pen on the back, June of 1977. A skinny young groom in a rented tux outside a courthouse in Marion, Ohio. And beside him, 19 years old, in a knee-length white dress, holding daisies, was my wife. Younger than I had ever seen her. But her. The set of the chin, the self-possession, unmistakable. Under the photo, Wendy wrote one more thing. My father's name is Raymond Kessler. My mother left us when I was 2 years old. I am 46 now, and I have never received so much as a birthday card. I am not writing to you for money, Mr. Novak. I am writing to warn you. She has come back. I did not answer that last part right away, because I did not understand it yet. I would, soon enough. Here is where 40 years of a certain kind of work took over. Another man would have confronted his wife that night. I have watched 1,000 confrontations, and I will tell you what they produce. A better story. Confront a liar early, and all you do is send them home to rehearse. So I said nothing. I kissed my wife goodnight. And in the morning, I did what I had done my whole working life. I went and found the paper. The marriage was easy. One written request to the probate court down in Marion County, Ohio, a small fee, and a certified copy came back in 9 days. Raymond J. Kessler and Lorraine M. Doyle, married June of 1977. Doyle, her maiden name. The same maiden name on my own marriage license from 1985, where, in her own handwriting, in the box asking about prior marriages, she had written the word none. The divorce was the hard part, because I was looking for something that did not exist. And this is the piece I want every one of you to know about, because any person listening to me can do this for themselves. Every county clerk in this country will search their divorce records for a name and a range of years, and if nothing is there, they will give you a certified paper that says so. It is called a certificate of no record. It costs a few dollars. It is 1 page, and it is one of the heaviest documents I have ever held. I requested searches for Lorraine, under both names, in Marion County, in the counties around it, and in our own county in Indiana, for every year from 1977 to our wedding day, in 1985. One by one the envelopes came back. No record. No record. No record. My old friend Rosie, who spent 30 years behind the records counter downtown and helped me word the Ohio requests, read the stack over her glasses, and said something I will not forget. Carl, in 40 years I have stamped 10,000 papers proving what people found. This is the first time the paper that does not exist is the whole story. Because here is the plain arithmetic of it. If Lorraine married Ray Kessler in 1977, and no court anywhere divorced them before June of 1985, then on the day she stood next to me in that Lutheran church, she was still another man's wife. And a marriage entered while a prior marriage is still standing is not a bad marriage or a broken marriage. In every state in this country, it is void. It never legally happened at all. I checked that with a lawyer later, and he checked it twice. Remember it. A bigamous marriage is void from the very first day. There was one more question, and it was the one that mattered most. Did she know? Because a 19-year-old who runs from a bad situation and honestly believes some lawyer handled things, that is a tragedy. A woman who knows, for decades, and says nothing, that is something else. The answer was in 2 places. The first was the public library in Marion, Ohio, at a microfilm machine, because when a person cannot be found, the law lets their spouse divorce them by publication. A notice in the legal columns of the local paper, run for weeks, and if nobody answers, the judge grants it. I sat in that quiet room with the film reels whirring, spooling through the Marion Star, and there it was, in the fall of 1990. Legal notice. Raymond J. Kessler versus Lorraine M. Kessler, whereabouts unknown. Decree granted March of 1991, which meant, friend, do the math with me, that from my wedding day in 1985 until March of 1991, while Carrie was born, while Doug was born, my wife was legally married to 2 men at the same time. Our marriage was void at the altar, and nothing that came after could reach back and repair it. The second place was the cedar chest. I am not proud of this part. While she was at her sister's for a weekend, I opened my own bedroom's one locked box with a key I found taped behind the headboard, which itself told me plenty. There were no linens. There was a shoebox, and in the shoebox, folded small, was a newspaper clipping of that exact legal notice, cut out by hand, the scissor line wandering the way it does when the hands are shaking. And under it, an envelope from a law office in Marion, postmarked 1991, addressed to Lorraine at a post office box in Fort Wayne I never knew she had. The envelope was slid open. The decree was inside. She knew. She had known since before Beth was born. She had cut the notice out of the paper herself and kept it, the way people keep the thing they are most afraid of, close enough to check that it is still sleeping. I sat on the floor of my bedroom with that shoebox for a long time. 39 years, 3 children, every Christmas morning, every hospital waiting room, all of it standing on a marriage that legally did not exist, and a woman who knew it and let me build my whole life on the ice anyway. And then, because I am who I am, I put everything back exactly where it was, taped the key behind the headboard, and started asking the investigator's last question, not what, why now? Wendy answered it in our second conversation, and it broke my heart in a different direction. Her father, Ray, had sold his trucking company a few years back for right around $2 million. 14 months ago, his doctors told him his heart was failing, and about 2 years ago, at a class reunion in Marion, a poised woman from his past had reappeared, all warmth and daisies and memory lane. Wendy watched this woman circle her dying father like weather. And then, 5 weeks after Ray's diagnosis became common knowledge at his church, that same woman filed for divorce from a retired insurance man up in Fort Wayne. That is why Wendy warned me. Not for money. Because she was 2 years old the last time her mother left a husband, and she remembered how it felt from the other side. So there was the whole shape of it, laid out like a claim file. Lock in my house, my retirement, and a monthly check with one hand. Marry a sick rich man with the other. And the only thing standing between Lorraine and that plan was a stack of paper she was certain no one would ever pull. Now you understand the courtroom. You understand why I stood up in July and said give her everything, while my sister wept behind me. It was not surrender. It was procedure. I had learned one thing above all in 40 years. You do not show a fraud your evidence before they sign. You wait. You let them fill out every form, swear every oath, smile every smile. Because the moment Lorraine signed those settlement papers, she also signed a sworn financial affidavit, and on that affidavit, under penalty of perjury, in the box for prior marriages, my wife wrote, for the second time in her life, the word none. My lawyer, Nathan Pruitt, a sharp young fellow I had kept completely in the dark, watched her do it and thought his client was simply broken. I was not broken. I was closing a file. 2 weeks after the decree, she overreached, exactly on schedule, the way they always do. First, her lawyer sent a letter claiming my late mother's lake cottage as marital property, and then Lorraine called our daughter Carrie and announced a family dinner at Carrie's house that Sunday because, she said, she had wonderful news the whole family should hear together. She wanted to introduce someone, a dear old friend she had reconnected with, a gentleman named Raymond. I sat with my phone in my hand after Carrie relayed that, and I will confess to you the one unchristian moment of this whole account. I laughed, alone in my kitchen, out loud. She was going to gather my children in one room to celebrate her engagement to the man she was still, in the eyes of God and the state of Ohio, until 1991, married to when she married me. She built the stage herself. All I had to do was bring the envelope. Sunday came. Pot roast at Carrie's, the good tablecloth, my 3 kids and their spouses, and Lorraine at the head of the table in a new blue dress, glowing. Raymond was not there. Resting his heart, she said. They would all meet him soon. And then she tapped her glass and made her announcement. She had found love again, late in life, with a wonderful man, and she hoped her children could be happy for her, because everyone deserves a second chance. The table went quiet the way tables do when children are asked to applaud something that cost their father everything. Beth stared at her plate. Doug's jaw worked. Carrie, my reader, watched her mother the way she reads contracts. I set my fork down, and I asked my one question, gently, the way you ask the question you already hold the answer to. Lorraine, I said, what year did your divorce from him go through? The first time, I mean. You could hear the furnace come on. Her face did something I had only ever seen on the other side of a deposition table, and my children turned and looked at me, because they did not yet understand a word of it. And that is the moment I want to stop and talk straight to you, friend. If this story has hold of you right now, take 1 second, press that subscribe button, and stay close, because everything you have been waiting for happens at this dinner table, and on one sidewalk, in the next few minutes. I took the envelope from my jacket, the same envelope from the courtroom, and I said the sentence I had waited 5 months to say. 3 documents beat a good story, every time. I laid the first sheet on the tablecloth. A certified marriage record, Marion County, Ohio, June of 1977. Raymond Kessler and Lorraine Doyle. Beth whispered, "Mom, who is that?" Lorraine said nothing. I laid the second sheet beside it, a certificate of no record. I explained, in the same flat voice I used for 40 years of claim reviews, what it was and what it meant, that no court on this earth divorced her before 1991. Carrie picked both pages up, read them twice, the way she reads everything, checked the seals with her thumb, and looked up at her mother, and my daughter, the paralegal, said, quietly, "These are real. Dad's marriage to you was void. There was never a marriage at all." I laid the third sheet down, her own sworn affidavit from 5 weeks ago. Prior marriages, none, signed under oath. And that is when the doorbell rang. Because I had asked one more guest to come at 7:30, and she was standing on the porch with a yearbook under her arm and her father's chin and her mother's eyes. I went to the door myself, and I said to my 3 children, "There is somebody here you should have met 40 years ago. This is Wendy. She is your sister." I will not narrate every minute of the next hour, because some of it belongs only to those 5 kids. And yes, I said 5 and I meant 4. And yes, I count Wendy now, and you will hear why. But I will give you the 3 moments I keep. Doug took the yearbook Wendy brought, Marion High, class of 1976, and turned to the page with the prom photograph, Ray and Lorraine, 18 years old and laughing. And my son said, slowly, "Mom, your yearbook at home has a page torn out. I found it when I was 10. You told me it was water damage. I have wondered about that page for 25 years. Beth, my keeper of cards, asked Wendy one question in a voice like a child's. Did she ever send you anything? A birthday card, anything? And Wendy said, not one, in 46 years. And Beth put her hand over her mouth, because Beth has 3 shoeboxes full of her mother's greeting cards, and she was doing arithmetic no daughter should have to do. And Lorraine, cornered at the head of the table she had set for her own coronation, finally chose her defense, and it was the wrong one. She stood up and said, I was 19 years old. I was drowning in that town. I did what I had to do to survive. And I said, you were 19 when you ran, Lorraine. You were 65 last month when you signed the word none under oath. That is not surviving. That is a career. She left without her coat. Through the window, I watched her sit in her car in Carrie's driveway for 11 minutes before she drove away, and I felt, God help me, not triumph. I felt the specific sadness of finishing a long file. The legal end came quickly, because fraud on a court is the one thing judges do not sleep on. Nathan filed the motion within the week, the void marriage, the sworn affidavit, the shoebox, all of it. There was a hearing in August. She came with a new lawyer who tried the only card in the deck, arguing that after Ray's publication divorce in '91 we had lived on as husband and wife in good faith, and some courts will patch a marriage for people who honestly did not know. Nathan stood up holding the newspaper clipping in its evidence sleeve, the one she cut out with her own shaking hands, and he said the line I had hired him for. A divorce can end a marriage, Your Honor. It cannot end one that never legally began. And good faith cannot survive a woman's own scissors. The judge vacated the entire settlement, ordered what the law calls an equitable unwinding instead, and wrote one sentence in that order that I had known was coming since February, because it is simply what the law says. Because the parties were never lawfully married, there is no marital estate for this court to divide. Lorraine walked out of the courthouse ahead of us with the order in her hand, reading it on the move, the way people read test results. And on the sidewalk on Calhoun Street, at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, in front of a hot dog cart and two lawyers and a man walking a beagle, my wife of 39 years, who was never my wife at all, reached that sentence, and her knees quit, and she went down onto the concrete, and her purse spilled, and nobody moved toward her for 3 long seconds. And I am not proud that I watched, but I had promised myself in February that I would, and I promised you at the start of this that I would tell you which sidewalk. That one. That is the one. I did finally walk over. I picked up her purse and handed it back to her, because 39 years is 39 years, whatever the paper says. She looked up at me and asked the only honest question she asked all year. What happens to me now, Carl? And I told her the truth. The same thing that happens to everybody, Lorraine. You get exactly what you built. The unwinding took the fall. She kept her own savings and a fair figure the judge set for her years in the household because I did not fight that and did not want to. The house stayed mine. My mother's cottage stayed mine. The monthly checks ended before they started. And Raymond, when Wendy sat with her father and told him all of it, the void marriage, the affidavit, the shoebox, the sidewalk, Ray listened from his recliner with his oxygen line hissing and then delivered the verdict that ended the last of her plans. I divorced this woman once already through the newspaper, he said, because she could not be found. A man does not marry a thing he had to publish notices to get free of. He and I have spoken on the phone a few times since, 2 old men she ran between, and there is a strange peace in it, like 2 claims adjusters comparing the same fire. Lorraine lives in an apartment on the north side now. She took a job at a fabric store. I learned that from Beth, who checks on her mother once a month, because Beth is Beth, and I have never once told her not to. The kids each found their own road with their mother, and none of those roads is mine to pave. What I can tell you is what happened on my side of the street. The phone calls came for weeks that fall, and they stitched us back together one seam at a time. Carrie called about documents at first, because that is her language, and ended up crying about Christmas mornings. Doug called from a job site and talked for an hour about that torn yearbook page, and finished by saying, "Dad, I spent my whole life thinking Mom was hard to reach because of something wrong with us. It was never us. It was the shoebox." And Wendy called every Sunday evening at 7, careful and polite, until the week she wasn't careful anymore and just talked. And somewhere in there my 3 kids started calling her our sister like it was a fact of nature, which, as it turns out, it is. Thanksgiving came, and I want to leave you with the 3 pictures I will keep from it, because they answer the woman on the sidewalk better than any court order. The first picture is my dining room table on Kirkwood Street set for 11. 3 kids, their spouses, my grandchildren, my sister Pauline, and 1 more chair on the end that stood empty at every holiday for 40 years, without any of us knowing it was empty. Wendy sat in it, and passed the rolls and argued with Doug about football, and the chair was just a chair, doing what chairs are for. The second picture came after the pie, when Carrie stood up with a flat-wrapped package and the whole table went suspiciously quiet. Inside was a frame, and inside the frame, printed and matted like a diploma, was a message. A screenshot of the first message Wendy ever sent me, the one I nearly deleted at my kitchen table in February. Underneath it, Carrie had typed 1 line. The truth knocked. Our father answered. It hangs in my hallway now, straight across from the front door, where a wedding portrait used to be. And the third picture. At the end of the night, with her coat already on, Wendy came back from the porch and pressed an envelope into my hands, and my heart did a small stumble, because this whole story began with an envelope in a jacket pocket, and I have complicated feelings about envelopes now. Open it, she said. Inside was a wedding invitation. Hers this spring, to a patient good man named Pete. She has been slow dancing around for years. And there, on the inner card, in printed letters I had to read 3 times, it said, "The bride will be escorted down the aisle by her father, Carl Novak." I looked up and she was crying and laughing at the same time, and she said, "I waited 46 years for somebody to want that job." And I said, "Sweetheart, the position was never vacant. It was just waiting on its paperwork. So that is my story, friend." A woman once told me I would die alone in a rented room. The rented room exists, as it happens. She lives in it, and my house is loud on Sundays, and there are 11 chairs at my table. And this spring, an old insurance man in his one good suit is going to walk a librarian down a church aisle in Dayton, Ohio, and nobody in that building will care what the paperwork used to say. Here is what 40 years of fraud files and one shoebox taught me, and I will keep it short, because the pie is gone, and so is my coffee. Paper is patient, and liars are not, so if something in your life has never quite added up, go find the paper. It costs a few dollars and a stamp. A marriage, a family, a father, none of those are made real by a license or erased by the lack of one. They are made real the same way anything is, by who shows up and keeps showing up until the showing up becomes the record. And one more thing. 3 documents beat a good story, but one true knock at the door beats them all. If this story reminded you of somebody, share it with them tonight. Tell me your city down in the comments so I know how far we traveled together. And if you want more true-to-life stories about family, quiet justice, and second chances that arrive late but arrive, subscribe and join me for the next one. Take care of each other and answer the knock.